I'm going to talk about some of the things that I run into with home inspectors that I see where they make mistakes and errors, and so we want to just jump right into it. Yeah. For some reason, my computer is not advancing.
There we go.
All right. So avoiding trouble. Roofing is one of the top 5 complaints made against home inspectors. It's very highly litigated. Some of the things that I see where trouble is caused is a lot of inspectors make assumptions. They raise expectations with clients or not control their expectations. They have wrong or vague descriptions, not being able to recognize a defect or an error. So you shouldn't assume that a stain is old. If it's a stain on the ceiling, you should just report that stain and just say, if you want to say that it's dry at the time, you should check it with your moisture meter, but if you can say that, but just say dry at the time of the inspection, but don't assume that it's old. Don't assume a new roof is correctly installed. They often are not. Don't assume anything. So don't even assume new roofs are without defect. This is was on a pre-drywall inspection, and they had splits in the flashing, the wall flashing, I mean, in scattered spots just like this. And you just can imagine once the siding is put on, this is like near impossible to find. But you should always kind of check that sort of thing. This is again a new construction where you can actually see the flashing bent down and it's exposing wood, and that's definitely going to leak. If you see screws in metal roofing, which is being put on a lot of new homes, you shouldn't see screws. And I see this actually on a regular basis, and they just, I'm not sure why they do it, but anyway, they screw it up there to the house, and that's not acceptable. It's a leak potential. Again, you shouldn't see any type of gaps in metal roofing like you see here. And again, if it looks wrong, it probably is wrong, but you shouldn't see any type of gap like that. That's just a leak. And this was a new house. I'm going to give you a lesson that I learned, which about making assumptions, and it created a really big mess. And so the story is, I was hired to look at this roof that was put on an addition, and they cut in they used an old valley, and I was hired to come look at the roof before they signed off on it, basically. And I see this valley, and I did not like the valley, and I'm gonna hope this video plays.
It's working.
So the valley had errors for sure, but the mistake that I made is that there was a stain that showed up later, and I was quick to assume that the valley was leaking. And the roofer, I had a conversation with him on the phone, and he would not come back. He said that it was because leaves were laying in the valley. And the homeowner, who was an attorney, by the way, was asking me what he should do because there was a big stain on the ceiling. And the attic was just really, you just couldn't get into the attic, and it was during the summer and it was very hot. So I told him he should probably call another roofer. Another roofer came out, and the roofer basically agreed, but he would not just repair the valley. He wanted to replace the whole roof, which was thousands of dollars. Anyway, he ended up doing it. About a couple months went by, and it was still summertime. And I get a call, and the homeowner says that I need you to come back. The roof is leaking. And I said, "Where's it leaking now?" He says, "Leaking in the same place." And I said, "Okay." He says, "I want you to come over here, and I want that roofer to come over here, and I want the original roofer to come over here." So we all go over there, and when I first get there, I'm thinking to myself, I said, "It hasn't rained," and they're arguing. The two roofers are arguing, and I squeezed myself up into the attic, and something I did not want to see. It was a drain for the air conditioning. It had been cut by the builder who built the addition, and it was dripping on the ceiling. And sure enough, the valley was not right, but that's not what was causing the stain. So you should never assume. And this was a big legal mess that I didn't have any liability, but the builder actually had the liability. But how I covered myself is this next slide. I actually had this on my report that I could not get into the attic, and I could get on it. I got into that day, but it wasn't easy. And so that just goes to show you shouldn't assume, but you should also always cover your limitations, this is sort of what got me out of the liability part of it. But it was kind of a messy situation. So don't assume. Even if the flashing looks normal and there's no ceilings that have stains and there's no leaking, you should never assume that there's not a problem. Always try to inspect for symptoms of leaking in the attic. And this is from inside of an attic where they had tried to use caulk to patch a chimney flashing.
This looks like water droplets.
Yep. So always try to get into the attic and make no assumptions. Descriptions are critical. A poor description can cause you a lot of trouble. I was once involved in a complaint where an inspector described this roof shake as needs repair. And you can see that the felt paper or the underlayment is showing. It was like that throughout the roof. So when you see exposed underlayment and deterioration to this degree, it's not a repair, it's a replace. And if somebody wants to come along and try to repair it, that's on them. But don't as an inspector, you should never say repair when a roof is in that kind of condition. Descriptions are critical, especially when the list of dumb things people do never ends. So what do you see here? Obviously, you'll see the shingles that are just kind of patched in there. But if you look right there, that vent there is actually upside down. Again, it's upside down. It's supposed to be the other direction. So here's another brilliant idea, that they have the coax cable coming through the valley or through the flashing. Not good. Inspect this and see how many issues you see. You see that the shingles on the left there are under the flange. On the right, they're over the flange. They're supposed to be over the flange. And when it's done that way, where that arrow is pointing, the top of that flange is exposed. So water is just going to run right under that collar and into the roof, into the attic. Again, inspect this. Again, it's upside down. And this is on the same roof, and it's another upside down collar. The rubber is torn and split, and again, I got the screwdriver stuck under the top of the flange where water is just going to pour into that, around that pipe. It's nothing to keep it from leaking. And then it's really dumb. I was inside of a porch, and I looked up at the ceiling, and I see boards cut between the rafters of the porch, and they're screwed on. And I said, that's really odd. Anyway, I get up on top, and the screws are actually coming through the roof, and it pushed the nails up through the shingles. That's just still today, that's just one of the most crazy things I've ever seen. I never understood why inspectors guess on how much service life remains. There's no requirement for it. It just greatly increases your liability, but inspectors do it all the time. So I'm going to give you an example. The shingles were lifted on this house like this, and the inspector that did this inspection, he did not mention the lifted shingles, but he made a comment that they need to budget to replace in 5 years. All the client heard was 5 years, so she bought the house, and just as soon as she bought it, moved in, her insurance company notifies her that her shingles are lifted and they cannot insure the house without replacing it. So she immediately filed suit against the inspector, and I actually testified in court, but the inspector actually won because of his contract, basically. Again, all the client heard was 5 years. And that's usually what people hear. They hear what they want to hear, basically. So I just don't recommend raising expectations, and that's what that does. Why guess on remaining service life? If you think the roof is worn out, say that it's worn out. If you think it's going to need to be replaced in a few years, just say that it's near the end of its life expectancy or a service life, and then recommend close monitoring. I think it's a bad idea also to tell a person that they have a 25 or 30-year roof, or I've even seen inspector reports say that it has a lifetime roof. It just raises the expectations of the client, because if they have a problem, that's all they're going to think about, and they're going to immediately be calling you. If you think the roof is worn out, just say so. Bald tires fail inspection, and so do bald shingles. I've heard people talk about if it's not leaking, it's not defective. I just never have understood that. If you don't write that roof up, and you in front of a judge, and the judge says, and he sees that photo and they have a leak, you're just going to lose. It's just no way to get around it. If you insist on documenting service life, I would suggest more something like this. The expected life is, when new, is 18 to 25 years, but it can vary depending on the quality materials, the design, direction of orientation, installation quality, weather conditions, or adequate maintenance. Good descriptions are critical in avoiding, I'm sorry. Poorly describing defects invites trouble. Also, when warranted, you should add wording like the leak potential is high. ASHI requires a reasoning or an explanation to be in the report if it's not evident. Of course, to an inspector, bare wood on the side of a skylight curb is definitely, to an inspector, it's evident, but it may not be evident to a homeowner. A lot of times people are just clueless about things, and I'm sure most of you guys know that. I'm having trouble getting my, there you go. Explaining the implications is a good practice. You should never think that the problem that you're describing is self-evident to an ordinary client, but you should never assume that they understand something. You have to try to be careful about how you explain things. I've had clients even ask me what a shingle is. It's a better practice to assume the client doesn't know what the implications of a defective roof is or what the cost is, because a lot of times they just don't know. I had a client once tell me, well, I once told a client that he had a torn plumbing collar, and I showed this photo in the report, and he just ignored it. A month later, after moving in, a tropical storm came through, and his complaint to me was that I didn't emphasize that it would leak. And I mean, it was a really bad leak. So ever since then, I always say leak potential is high when I think that's, you know, real likely to leak. When you see stuff like this, it's definitely going to leak. ASHI requires recommendations to correct. That doesn't mean you have to give a detailed repair. I see roofers. I mean, I see inspectors giving details on how to repair something. I just don't understand why they do that. It's just if they repair whatever you tell them to do and it still is a problem, then it's your problem.
Hey, John.
Yes.
What about instead of saying repair or replace, how about just saying corrective action or something?
That's what I use, yeah. Let's see. ASHI SOP says that the inspector is not required to determine methods, materials, or cost of corrections. I would just stick to recommend correcting or recommend repair or replace as deemed necessary by a licensed professional contractor. ASHI SOP and all state licensing require descriptions, which includes roofing. I often see vague descriptions in roofing in reports, such as composition, membrane, 3-tab. Are these descriptions adequate? Per the ASHI SOP, for a description is defined as to identify a system or component or other distinguishing characteristics. So is composition shingles adequate? I personally don't like it, but it's probably better than just composition. Sometimes I just see composition. The problem I have is there's various types of composite shingles, and this picture is of a roof with 4 different types of roofing on it on one slope. A description should help the reader distinguish the materials from other similar roofing materials. Composition shingles may be close enough, but it's certainly not precise because there are so many different types of composition shingles, like 3-tab, asphalt 3-tab shingles. You got architectural shingles. You got luxury or designer shingles, all composition shingles. You got premium or tri-laminates, which is again a composition shingle. You got Grand Manor, which is a designer or luxury type shingle. It's a composite shingle. I think a better description would be to at least call it what the manufacturers call it, which is usually 3-tab or architectural shingles. The building code refers to them as asphalt shingles, by the way. This is just what I typically use. I try to be a little bit more descriptive than just, you know, composition shingles. This, by the way, this roof is actually on a roofer's house, and the roof is actually in perfect condition. It's nothing wrong with it. It's just I guess he used scrap shingles from jobs, but if you see something like that, you have to describe it. So you'd have to tell somebody that's 3 or 4 different kinds of shingles on the roof. Let's talk about describing flat roofing. Unlike steep roofing, a flat roof has to be, a steep roof only has to shed water. A flat roof has to be waterproof. The code requires a minimum of 1/4 and 12 on flat roofing. Can't be perfectly flat. So EPDM is it looks like a tire inner tube. It feels like a tire inner tube, and it typically, unless it's old, it'll have a stamp on it, and the stamp will say EPDM. And the first 2 letters usually is the year that the manufacturer made the rubber, or the EPDM. And there's usually a number that's sort of in the middle that will say 045 or it'll say 060 on houses. There's some other thicknesses, but that's the thickness of the rubber. Just that's not something you would really need to report, but the year would certainly help you with determining how old it is. And I see this a lot on houses. Well, not a lot, but I see it often. You won't see this on a commercial probably, but on a house, a lot of times these rubber roofs or EPDM roofs are put on by, a lot of times they're put on by roofers, but they don't really know flat roofing. But if you roll that rubber up on the side of where the flashing or goes around the perimeter of the roof, and you see a glue that looks yellow like that, that's the wrong kind of glue. That's going to leak. That roof, where it meets the metal flashing, that glue has to be black. It's a black glue. It's not a yellow glue. The yellow glue is what they use to glue it down to the field of the roof, which is the insulation or the plywood that's under it. It's like a contact cement, and it's not made to be put on. It's not waterproof. Basically, it's not made to be on flashings. The flashing glue is a black glue. So you should be able to see a black glue there, not a yellow glue. These flat roofs that are over front entrances of houses is something you really need to pay attention to. I see these leaking more often than not. They typically leak where that railing attaches to the roof, and it's easy to miss because a lot of times the ceiling of those are vinyl, but you have to look for stains, and just I really highly recommend looking at it really close because they really often leak. That particular one, actually, I could look out the window there and up there, and I could actually see a cut in the roof. So, but that's not what you normally see. Normally, you have problems with the posts that are around it. Now, this house has a little railing around it, and it was leaking. And as you walk up to the house, you can see where the soffit or the ceiling of the porch is kind of pulling down, and it's because the wood under there had swollen up from leaks, and it popped all the aluminum loose, and you can see it close up there. But that roof was leaking all around the perimeter. So you look for things like that, and I don't remember if this was the same roof or not, but it's the if you get up on the roof and look at where they strip the edges off, you look for separation in the joints or the laps, and if you see separations like that, that's a defect. You need to report that. That's going to leak. The details around a lot of these houses where these flat roofs on are not right. They wrap the EPDM around the edge, and that's not a detail that you'll find on any of the installation instructions. And the problem is that water will just kind of wrap around that, and you can see where it's actually wrapping around it and dropping down below the gutter onto the white aluminum. And That's not our proper detail. It's supposed to be stripped off with aluminum or with a flashing detail, but not wrapped around like that. Again, keep a really close eye on these where these railings attach. They often leak, and you'll see this type of thing where they got these lag screws and those railings, and they're not sealed, or sometimes they're not sealed at all, and sometimes they're sealed really poorly. But they often leak, especially when the little porch roof holds water like this one has been.
Hey, John,
Yes.
what's your opinion of inspecting a roof with drones?
Well, it's easy to miss something, but I know a lot of people are doing it. That's probably a topic in itself. But if you get up on the roof and push down on the edges of these little flat roofs, if you feel spongy, soft spots, it's definitely probably leaking. But this one was actually, you could actually push your finger down a ½ inch into the wood. Again, you don't want to see open gaps like this around these flat roofs. This is not a proper detail, and it's probably leaking. Again, you can see where the water has been standing on the roof and around those post connections, and it's leaking. Again, this porch was had a railing around it. This was actually a big like walkout type thing, but every one of those posts on that house was leaking, and it was leaked right directly under every post. And this is what the edge is supposed to be. It's supposed to have a flashing detail that, and the EPDM on the field of the roof is supposed to be under the flashing. Then it's supposed to be stripped off with a strip that basically kind of seals it together. It's like you sandwich the flashing between the two layers, and it provides a proper seal. And on posts, there's details that you can find that tells you how to wrap a post so it doesn't leak. It's absolutely never done. I've actually rarely seen it. Again, you don't want to see a strip around the perimeter that's screwed to it to hold it on. That's improper. That's going to leak. And you look for things around the post, because sometimes things don't get quite finished. But again, they didn't finish this, and it was leaking. And then I see sometimes inspectors putting improper descriptions on on reports, and they put on this report they inspect it using a drone, but they call the TPO roof a built-up membrane roof, and it's all fine and good until you get a complaint. And when you get a complaint, the roofer comes out and says, well, the inspector don't even know what he's doing. He called that a membrane, built-up membrane roof. It's a TPO roof, which creates problems. And this is actually, I did actually have a complaint like this, very similar to this, but so it does, stuff like that does happen. But that's a TPO roof. And the TPO is a white membrane that looks kind of like a inner tube, I mean, not inner tube, it looks like a pool liner. And it feels like a pool liner. A modified bitumen roof, a lot of times I see people calling it rubber roof. It's not a rubber roof. I think the confusion comes is because one of the manufacturers calls it a rubberoid material, but it's not a rubber. It's a rubbery, but it's not a rubber roof. But it's usually torched down. It's sometimes put down with hot asphalt. It can be put down with an adhesive, cold applied adhesive. But it's, on houses, it's usually put down with a torch. I don't see it often very anymore. I mean, you might see it on older stuff, but So you have mineral surface rolled roofing, then you have mineral surface modified bitumen. It's often and easily confused. There is a difference, and you don't want to call if the house has if it has a roll roofing, a mineral surface roll, you don't want to call it a modified roof because it's a big difference, and they don't have the same life expectancy. The difference is that the modified bitumen is a heavier roofing material. It'll last 10 to 16 years. It's usually fully adhered. It can be put down with a torch, or it can be cold adhesive, or it can be hot asphalt. And there's also a self-adhering version. Mineral surface roll roofing is it could be used generically as any type of roof that comes rolled, but it's typically referred to as just roll roofing or mineral surface roll roofing, but it's not the same thing, and I'm going to talk about that just a little bit more. But so don't use roll roofing as a description; it's too generic. A better description would be mineral surface roll roofing, and you probably don't see it real often on houses because it's really poor, low quality roofing. But you might see it on additions or some sort of a porch or shed or garage or something in carport. The code actually calls it mineral surface roll roofing, which is what I would call it. Mineral surface roll roofing it's really kind of like a shingle in a roll. It's about the same thickness as a shingle, and that's kind of how you have to just kind of vision that when you're trying to figure out what it is. It is hard to tell sometimes, but it's usually used on low slow slope applications such as carports, patio sheds. This is roll roofing. It usually has a ripply look. It's usually face nailed, although the face nailing is not compliant with the instructions. The instructions don't tell you to do that, but that's usually what you see. And it usually has roof cements on the laps. Again, this is kind of a close-up of a roll roofing, and the seam is kind of coming apart. And that's usually what you'll see. It comes in 36 and 39-inch rolls. So you'll see some stuff on the internet that you can always tell it's a roll roofing and it's 36 inches, but that's really not true. It will come in 39-inch rolls. It comes in different colors, white. Most of the time I see is white, but you can get it in different colors. It has a 6 to 10 year service life at best. It usually has a lot of exposed nails. Every nail is a potential leak. So look at that closely and look for reasons to write it up. As it would be my experience, would be my advice. It's very inexpensive. It's used a lot by do-it-yourselfers. It has a short lifespan, but it's important that you can recognize it. So if you want to learn more or try to recognize it, just go to Lowe's or Home Depot, and they have rolls of it in there. You can just look at it and tell. But modified bitumen is a thicker, tougher material. It has modifiers in it to give it some better characteristics. It's reinforced. It's more durable. Both types have a coating on it. Mineral surface and mineral surface modified bitumen both have a surface coating that protects it from the sun. They look similar from a distance. How to tell the difference? You look at the edges. The modified bitumen is slightly thicker than a shingle, and mineral surface roll roofing is thinner, and it's very similar to a shingle. Modified bitumen is sealed down usually with a torch, although you do have the peel and stick type. Mineral surface is usually sealed down with roof cement. Mineral surface roll roofing is usually installed with nails, and modified bitumen should have no nails. The modified bitumen is thicker and more pliable than the mineral surface roll roofing, and it's a tougher material, and you can't tear it like you can a shingle. It takes a lot to tear it. Do they have slope limitations? Yes, they both have slope limitations. They both should be adequate, have adequate drainage. The modified bitumen can be on a 1/4 and 12 slope, but the mineral surface roll roofing is not viable when it's less than 1 in 12. The code in Virginia, anyway, it's probably the same way in the international code, is mineral surface roll roofing. It shouldn't be on 1 in 12, 8% slope, and the modified bitumen again is 1/4 in 12. So what do you see wrong with this modified bitumen? What the problem is that it doesn't have flashing stripped off around the sides of it, around the edges. This was a brand new roof, but it's improperly installed. It has to have a strip around it, and I think I have a picture of what it's supposed to look like. Yeah, it's supposed to have that detail. It's supposed to be a flashing detail with a strip going around it, like shown in that illustration. And it's basically, again, like the EPDM, it's sandwiched. And that's important that it's done that way. Again, here's what it's supposed to look like. It's supposed to have little strips around it, just like that. Wrong, correct. When you're looking at modified bitumen roofs, always look at the edges. That's usually where you'll see the failures. They'll separate from the flashing details, because that flashing detail is not correct. They used a drip edge like you use on a shingle roof, so that's wrong to start with. Another problem you'll see with these roofs is they don't prime the flashing. The flashing has to be primed before they stick it down, and if it's not primed, it's not going to adhere. It's not going to stay adhered. You don't want to see flashing details like that that's lapped the wrong direction. It has to be shingled like you would put shingles on. It has to be lapped the other direction, or it's potentially could leak. Again, here's where they use the flashing that they use is too narrow. It can't be a little thin piece of flashing like they put like on a shingle roof on the drip edge. That's not proper. It's supposed to be a 3.5 by 3.5 piece of flashing at minimum, and some specs say 4 by 4, and importantly, it has to be primed. This is where it's primed, but they never stripped it off. So they got the primer right, but they didn't strip it off, so that's improper. Again, they got the flashing laid on top of the membrane like they should, but they never stripped it off. And this was actually a fairly new roof too, but it was not installed correctly. It wasn't finished properly. Again, that's what it's supposed to look like. That's another illustration. The flashing detail with a strip around it. Again, what it's supposed to look like. And you want to look for laps. The laps, it has to be sealed down. The asphalt is usually oozed out a little bit. And this one is definitely not oozed out. And when it's not oozed out, usually that's what you'll find, is you'll find that the laps are not sealed down properly. Again, this was an older roof, but the laps are not sealed. This was a smooth modified bitumen. It didn't have granulars on it. So it comes in granulars or smooth. This was a smooth one, and it's advanced age. If you see cracks in that like that, that's not a patch, repair, or paint job. That's a replace. When you see alligator cracking like that, that's time to be replaced. And even if it's not leaking, that's replacement. Again, cracks like that is time to be replaced. Cracks in the granular like that, it's time to be replaced. This one was actually a house that I inspected that I recommended to be replaced. And I went back for a recheck. And when I got back for the recheck, they had coated it all over. And I said, nope, that's not it. I said, that's going to have to be replaced. And you can see where it's not even sealed down to the flashing. So they spent money coating this, but I told them they had to replace it. Again, the membrane is not sealed to the flashing. Cracks. Older modified bitumen roof, and again, you got rusty flashing and it's not sealed down. That's replacement, time to be replaced. And this one is a modified bitumen roof with a patched plumbing collar on it, and that's it's self-adhesive type of modified bitumen they used to patch it in, but that's something you would write up, and all those cracks, it's just time to be replaced. Again, the laps are not sealed down. Pretty poor shape. You don't want to see that. That's not sealed down for one thing, but it's also the flashing job just looks terrible. That's a replacement. Modified bitumen often will have a little bit of a buckles in it, but as long as it's sealed down, it's okay. Because sometimes it's hard to get all the little wrinkles and stuff out of it, but it has to be completely sealed. Nothing can be open. Everything has to be sealed.
It looked like the corner back in the back where the shingles come all the way down to the modified bitumen, which is wrong.
Yeah, I don't remember that detail, but it's anyway, it's
The shingles are supposed to be held back at least 10 inches.
yeah. Avoiding trouble is also, it's good to set expectations in your contract and on the report. Examples would be in your contract or in your report also, if you want, just put down that the inspection is limited in scope, non-invasive, doesn't include destructive testing, latent or concealed deficiencies are excluded. Documentation of limitations is critical. For example, roof is out of reach of my ladder, I could not view. Roof is not visible from the ground, it could not be inspected. Roof was inspected from a distance with binoculars. Only part of the roof is inspected. Give reasons why, and if it's snow covered or not visible, you need to document that also. The method that you used needs to be included in the report, whether you're using binoculars, drones, crawl bots, or whatever, you need to put down how you inspected it, walked on it, whatever. And if it cannot be inspected, you should explain that in the report. So this house was a house that I got called to that had been inspected, and they did not. They weren't happy with the inspector, and fortunately, I got there before they actually had, moved forward with it. So the report said that the cedar or the wood shake roof had moss growth on most of the cedar shakes, and the laundry room, well, that's not important, but it basically says that it needed some repair. And what I could see was it was way beyond repair. It needed to be replaced. So you have to be careful how you describe the condition of roofs, because this would, I'm sure that if they would have bought it without me going there before they bought, this probably would have ended up in some sort of a courtroom. But anyway, if you see, like we talked about earlier, if you see felt paper everywhere like this, it's time to be replaced. And it's just no getting around it. And I think that's all I got, Hollis. Yeah. So anyway, that report needs cleaning and repair. I mean, that definitely doesn't match that. That's, you can stick your finger through the
It has
shake.
an exclamation mark there, though. Doesn't that count for something?
Yeah.
Okay,
So splits and exposed felt deterioration. If you see stuff like that, it's time to be replaced. It's not a repair. That's way beyond repair. If you can stick your finger into the shake like that, it's don't say repair. It's time to be replaced.
all right, so Sean, did we have any questions for John while we still got a few more minutes?
Yeah, I got a few things, John. First, thanks a lot. That was great. Really appreciate it. A question about parapets and flashing, specifically the way that modified bitumen or other roofing transitions up the slope of a parapet wall. Can you talk about that a little bit?
It's supposed to be up 8 inches, if I remember right. I mean, that's probably a topic I could talk about for an hour or so. I mean, what's any more specific questions about that? I mean, what is your question more than that? I think it's supposed to be
Maybe-
8 inches.
Maybe a common defect that you run across.
It's
Like
typically
I noticed
it's typically not sealed properly. Well, not typically, but a lot of times it's not sealed properly. A lot of times it has no counter flashing of any type. A lot of times it's not properly anchored to the parapet wall. And it could also be, deteriorated there. So it's just a good place to look for sure.
Gotcha. What about Atlas chalet shingles or other defective types that are known defective shingles? You got anything to say about them?
I have some good pictures of them, but I don't have it on the computer right this minute. But they sort of look like a architectural shingle from a distance, but if you get close, they're just strip shingles. They're not laminated, and they tend to blister and fail. I haven't seen them lately, so they may have already kind of washed out, but they definitely are usually defective.
Agreed.
Mm.
If you know offhand, can you put the slide that better describes the life expectancy that included installation, et cetera? Do you remember what that slide was?
No, what was it again?
The one that describes life expectancy, included installation and weather, et cetera.
That?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
There it is. Flat roof, EPDM details for terminations and penetrations. There was I think they wanted a diagram again. Do you know of any good resources that we can use the internet to find good diagrams about, like an EPDM detail for what it's supposed to happen at the terminations, or what is supposed to happen around the vent collar post penetration or something? Are there authorities?
I mean, I'm trying to
Obviously,
think.
obviously the manufacturers, right?
The
Of each.
manufacturer, I think it's I'm trying to
Sure.
remember. It's there's one that's more friendly. I think it's I want to say it's Firestone that has a more friendly I have a bunch of them that I could share sometime if you want me to.
Okay, there was,
Maybe we could have you come back for a 15-minute presentation in place of Mike's monthly minute with some little catch-up things.
Yeah, I have a bunch of illustrations that I can't remember if it's Firestone or it's I think it's Firestone, but I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think it is.
gotcha. What about EPDM without proper decking or underlayment underneath of it? Like it's on top of a tin roof, or somebody said, what if it's just the roof there and no decking underneath?
It's the manufacturer specs say that it has to have. You can have plywood as long as there's no like protruding nails or screws, or it can have recovery board or insulation board, a rigid board. It doesn't say that you can use like metal, put it over type of standing seam roof or anything like that. But I've seen that before, but it's not specified in their installation instructions.
Gotcha.
I would
Just
write it up. I would write it up if it's not plywood or insulation under, rigid insulation.
So if you see a mod bit roof and you can see telegraphing through where they bent over the seams of the standing seam metal.
Yeah.
Modified, I wouldn't have too much of an issue with, as long as everything is secured down, but not EPDM.
The sharp edges will cut right through it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I see that all the time on old houses where they put the modified over top of the standing seam.
What about walking on an EPDM surface on a balcony or something?
They have walk boards that they recommend to prevent damage, because it can be easily damaged. If you get something sharp in your shoe or something, it'll knock a hole in it. I don't think it's a good idea.
Like high heels.
Yeah.
And then finally, what's the TPO type roof that's put down with a torch?
I don't know of any TPOs that put down a torch.
Okay. Any sheet plastic or rubber like that with a torch?
They do have a rubber that they can put down with asphalt, but I've never seen it before. I know it's available, but I've never seen it.
Yeah, this is Bob. I see a lot of it in the Kentlands, in those little baby porch things that are on the second level. The guys out there with a blowtorch, toasting the plywood and rolling out the stuff that looks like TPO, and then he immediately rolls it with a 50-pound roller.
What about ballast cover roofs? In Southern California, we sometimes see gravel covered flat roofs. What's under that?
That's a TPO. I mean, that's an EPDM roof that has rock that hold it down. The big round rock, kind of a I don't know,
Like a
maybe
river rock?
golf ball size rock. Is that what you're talking about?
He said no, it's fairly fine gravel.
Fine
Built up.
gravel.
Built up.
Yeah,
That sounds like a built-up asphalt.
Yeah.
Question, I see damage from ladders that have had the end caps removed, even on new homes. How can siding and window contractors not scar up the new roofs?
They do.
By not doing that.
What's your opinion on ponding on a flat roof?
The rule is if it dries in 48 hours, it's usually not considered an issue, but it says it has to be, the installation instruction says it has to be positive drainage. But you do see water on older buildings, especially, that's sometimes inches deep. But I wouldn't recommend that on a residential house. It's a lot of weight.
That's all I had.
So
Thanks a
John,
lot.
John, when you were talking about the the front porticos with had a flat roof above a low slope roof above a front door, usually EPDM. Quite often I've seen where they'll replace the shingle roof, they'll replace the main roof, but not that flat roof. So that's part. And then all the rail stuff that you talked about really can come. They all work against each other. So you're right about those things. Leak often than they don't leak. And the other thing you were talking about that the roof where the roofers were arguing about the cause, and you went up in the attic and it wasn't roofing at all. I did one a number of years back where it was a similar situation where the master bathroom was just simply, there was one section of roof that only covered the master bathroom. So it had step flashing up against the house where it was, the main house was siding. And this master bedroom, when they first moved in, they noticed a stain in the ceiling. So they called a roofer, and it was right above the point where the house met where the bedroom roof met the house roof. That's where the stain was. So they hired a roofer. He went up there, and it's obviously a flashing problem. So he reflashed it. It still leaked. So they brought another roofer in, and he said, well, it's not a flashing problem, it's a roofing problem. So he replaced the whole roof. Now, I'm not saying the whole roof of the whole house, just the whole roof above the master bathroom. So now the stain now moved to a different location. So now the stain is under the new roofing. So when the stain was under the flashing, they replaced the flashing. The stain is over here in the field. They replaced the whole roof, and now it's leaking in a third place. Now we got a stain now in a third place. And that's when they finally called me and said, what the world's going on here? So I stood there and I listened to the husband and the wife, each of them telling me a different story. And they're obviously up trying to work together, but they both have different memories of what happened. Well, there was a stain here, then there was a stain there. Then we called this roofer, then the stain was somewhere else. And why does the stain keep moving around? And so I did what you did. Finally, I went up in the attic, and there was a dryer vent, a very long dryer vent, where there was a section, 3 feet long, that was centered, with a joint at each end. So a flexible piece coming up to this rigid metal piece with another flexible piece that went to the outside. So depending on weather conditions, this thing was doing this teeter-totter thing on that floor, on that ceiling joist, the bottom quarter of the truss. So depending on where the condensation was happening in the vent, it was moving, back and forth. So sometimes it was dripping out. The dryer condensate was dripping out, on over here where the flashing goes, and then another time of the year it would be dripping out the other end because this vent kept moving. This dryer vent was perfectly balanced. It kept moving back and forth.